I'm back. Last video I did a week ago on information control, Steve Hassan's bite model. Just a quick aside, if you haven't checked Tony Ortega's blog, Scientology has muscled its way into network television. They're going to get their channel. So that ought to be interesting. Uh, I don't have cable. Most of my friends do not have cable. My parents still have cable, so I don't know. It seems pretty silly to me. I know that Louis Farrakhan has supported Dianetics, and he's a polarizing figure and whatnot. Um, it'll be interesting to see what kind of stuff Gold pulls out of its hat to try and get new members and retaliate against the media that has been pretty hard on coming down pretty hard on them with Leah Remini and Louis Theroux and the HBO documentary and Chris Shelton and Tori Magoo, everybody that's been publishing. So I wouldn't be surprised if they do get some more members. They've been testing. They've been doing testing for potential recruits with experience in the business. That's kind of how I got in. I was a stage manager, and I had a particular skill set that they needed. So, with the promise of making inroads in the industry in Los Angeles, I could see them getting some recruits, but at the same time, it's just going to start that whole cycle with these people where, uh, well, I guess it'll lead right on into the bite model. If you haven't seen the other two, the first part is in part two of my videos when I resumed making them a couple weeks ago, and then the second part, which was information control, was in the last video. So today is emotional control, and I'll just read through and sort of share my experience. I would like to note that I don't think about Scientology too much in my everyday life anymore. I'm not. When I first started making videos, it was something that was on my mind all of the time. I was just sort of recently getting my head wrapped around that I'd been in a cult, and it's been 2 years. Well, 2 years since the divorce, but 3 years since well, it's 2017. Yeah, 2014 was really the year that I started like really heavily digging into all the material that's out there, and realized very quickly, all of a sudden, how destructive this cult was and how it had changed me. Emotional control. Manipulate and narrow the range of a person's feelings. Um, this is and I'm just going down the list here, and this one, this subject of emotional control is kind of nuanced. Might not communicate well. Having experienced it, I know exactly what all these things mean and how they applied to me, but I'll try to do my best in explaining how these points actually work in Scientology. and this is an overall guide for cults in general. So there were some things in previous videos that didn't really apply, but not many at all. So manipulate and narrow the range of a person's feelings. I would say that for me, that means on particular subjects, subject matters, um, sort of narrow the viewpoint into us versus them. Uh, what they call in Scientology make wrong, like psychology, psychiatry. Narrow your viewpoint to a point to where it's Scientology is the only answer. Um, and as far as your feelings go, uh, when you feel something, or at least when I was feeling something on staff, I'm a very intuitive person. I'm a musician. I go a lot on feeling. Feeling is crucial to making a good song. And prior to Scientology, I pretty much just felt life was a song, and I was living it, and sort of had my own belief system based around music. Um, so to suppress a person's feelings or to narrow the range of feelings is to narrow the possibilities of thought, in my opinion. Um, if you start to suppress your feelings, then you don't explore them and you don't come to a conclusion about them. You just put a hard stop there, um, then it's a way to control. Number two, make the person feel like if there are ever any problems, it is always their fault, never the leaders or the groups. Anyone who's been a Scientologist can attest to the fact that, um, especially staff Scientologists, Thursday at 2, make it go right. Any stops or barriers are merely the physical universe, and you're a spiritual being, and you can, it's your choice. It's your choice to not perform or not. Uh, it's your choice to have a problem. You can choose to have a problem, and say if you have a problem with Scientology, you're choosing to have that problem with Scientology, and just as easily as you choose to have that problem, it is expected for you to choose to not have that problem, regardless of the size, scope, magnitude, and legitimacy of that problem. Uh, good example is money problems. Uh, Prevailing thought in most of the reg cycles is money is energy, and you're a spiritual being, and you can manufacture and create energy. So money should never be a problem unless you make it a problem. And in a reg cycle, if money is an origination, um, then that's what you're going to probably be handled on. It's not the reg's fault for expecting you to come up with oodles and gobs of money, and it's not Scientology's fault for needing the money because they're spreading the truth, right? Number three, excessive use of guilt. Well, this one really, really, really worked on me. Because at the Melrose mission, as far as I know, and there were only about 8 of us, the core staff. I was the only one that had any real experience in the entertainment industry. So, uh, identity guilt, who you are not living up to your potential. That's number A1. Um, I was expected to make inroads with this community of up and coming stars, and then also some of the celebrities already online. And if I couldn't produce whatever the product was, uh, then I was in ethics trouble, and use of guilt, like why are you holding Scientology back? It eventually led to this. Oh, I forget the name of the process. I was a illegal PC, right? And I was brought into an office and read a reference, and basically was told, look, you need to clear yourself from this status so that you can continue to receive processing. Well, I didn't. I mean, the one thing that I really was interested in was auditing. I mean, a lot of the hell that I went through was to get help for myself in auditing. Your family, your past, your affiliations, your thoughts, feelings, actions, social guilt, historical guilt, ethics, OWs, overts and withholds, write-ups, pages and pages, doubt formulas, enemy formulas, liability formulas. These are all methods of using guilt and fear, excessive use of fear, fear of thinking independently, fear of the outside world, fear of enemies, fear of losing one's salvation, fear of leaving the group or being shunned by the group, fear of disapproval. And the fear aspect, I would say, doesn't really take hold until you've fully committed yourself. I guess if I had to say I had a fear when I left, it was for my immortal soul. Like most people say, it's like, you feel like you're leaving the one thing that can save you. No matter how distorted it may be, there's still a lot of people out there that believe in the teachings of L. Ron Hubbard, if you want to call them teachings. And there are a lot of people who have left the church who still practice Scientology and believe in Scientology that just think that the church has lost its way and that there's a separation going on, sort of akin to like the Lutheran and Protestant reformations. I never really had fear of the outside world, but I did know that I lost quite a bit of time, and it doesn't look good on a resume. By the way, I actually did put the church on my resume a few times, and one time it almost landed me a job at the biggest car dealership here in town, and very bullish car dealer. Won't mention his name, but he was nearing the end of his life, had cancer, and people around here are polarized by him locally because he's been a positive figure and a very negative figure, and people just don't know what to make of him. Well, I tested on. He does a test for potential sales earning potential, and I tested in the top 3%. I remember because when I went to get my result, the floor manager wanted me to meet the owner as soon as possible. So, and I was upfront about him the whole time. I upfront about my history the whole time. I was very desperate, needing a job, and I said, "Look, I used to sell spiritual freedom to people to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars, so I think I can sell a car, and my conscience would be clear." Regardless of what I need to do to get that person to sign on the line, which is dotted. I had a really good conversation with this guy. He built a multi-million-dollar car sales business, and he tried to intimidate me. Of course, whether I like it or not, I've been indoctrinated at some point in my life in a cult, and part of the indoctrination is TRs. So. I used my TRs. I let him have his moment of authority, and then I and then I attacked back because, like I said, no, people are polarized by this guy, and a lot of people are very afraid because he's so powerful. Uh, I sat in that room for 3.5 hours and talked with this guy about his mortality, and it was a very empowering moment, even though I didn't end up getting the job, because it was one of those Zorg moments from Fifth Element. I don't know if you've seen the Fifth Element, but there's two speeches. There's one that Zorg gives, and then there's one that the priest gives. And basically, his whole I don't know if you remember the moment, but Zorg presses a button for like a piece of fruit, and he's choking on the fruit. And the priest says, you know, at a moment's notice, a simple little fruit, you know, could topple your entire empire. And then he does the Heimlich, and the fruit comes out. It was one of those kind of moments. I felt like in control of a situation where, he was always in control. And I think that I know that he did because he expressed it. You know, he said that he was not used to people uh, confronting him and asking him questions. So the interview kind of turned around on itself, and it was a good thing. He died about 8 months, 9 months later, and in a way, it was kind of a confessional. I mean, I was somebody he didn't care to know, and he told me a lot of things which I won't share because they were personal. Um, so as far as fear goes, when I was saying the resume thing, that was one of the things that he brought up. He was like, you know, what's your experience, man? You know, like, what have you really done? He saw through the bullshit of my resume, and which, you know, hey, he wasn't a dumb guy. He was a very smart guy. He saw through the bullshit, but I saw through his bullshit too. All right, fear of enemies. I don't fear anybody. Not now. At the time, I feared some terminals on staff. I never feared the mission holders, whereas a lot of the other staff members did. They're just people, you know. I would tell them that. I would tell people that, and they're like, "Oh, they're OT." I'm like, I don't give a fuck if they're OT. How OT is it that his car broke down or that he needs another liver transplant? You know, like, give me a break. He's a human being. These things did not make me very popular. Extremes of emotional highs and lows. Boy, the end of my time on staff was marked by me trying to hang myself and the mission itself. They were letting me live in a closet, literally. I was living in a closet with a mattress on the floor and uh, not much else. There was a bathroom in the mission. There was no shower. Um, but anyways, extreme emotional highs and lows. You see it on the faces of everyone from staff to public to SO. Ritual and often public confession of sins. Now, in course or on course, when people do their communication course, a lot of times, what's the second one they do that's about overts and withholds? It's not ups and downs. Maybe it is ups and downs. People do ups and downs at the end of the course when they would graduate or whatever. A lot of times, not all the time, people would share a withhold that, you know, they felt was affecting their life negatively. And there you go. And the other thing would be conditions, ethics conditions. When you're doing liability or enemy or treason or anything like that, like with liability, you have to go to every terminal that you are connected with in the mission to get them to sign off on it. And basically, you've written your OWs up, but you're taking the worst ones basically and writing it down. It's all signed by everybody, and so they know. So every time you walk by, it's like They're constantly trying to get dirt on you. Phobia indoctrination is number 7. A programming of irrational fears of ever leaving the group or even questioning the leader's authority. The person under mind control cannot visualize a positive, fulfilled future without being in the group. This is a big part of the events, is what I think of, the events. And again, I was a horrible Scientologist. I would see everyone looking at the screen just like amazed at what Tom and Dave were doing and saying. And I felt out of place most of the time. I just felt out of place. There were a few times when I was being, recovered or in ethics recovery where maybe once or twice I went to an event and I really bought into it. But after the events, like I would always talk to ED or like our executives, and I was like, that's not right. It's not true. These statistics are bullshit. Like, you want me to sell this stuff? Why did everything get reprinted? Like, what was so wrong with the materials before? Are the people that are in control of keeping the tech working, making sure the technology, KSW, right? Why is KSW not being applied at the highest levels of the church? Why do we have to buy and sell all of these materials that have been fixed because of SPs infiltrating the organization? It sounds pretty bullshit to me. And that landed me in ethics. As far as the phobia of leaving the group, at that point it was my brother and myself, and for a time his wife, who was his girlfriend at the time. And more than anything, I was afraid of the disconnection. That was the fear. I was afraid of disconnection, not of ever leaving the group. I actually told one of my staff, one of the other staff members, that this guy used to always talk about being in the trap, being in the theta trap, the messed universe. Don't you want to go free? He would always be the guy. He was the guy that got me in, and he was ultimately always the guy when I was about to blow, who they would use to convince me to stay. And one conversation we had, he was giving me that old "Don't you want to go free" line, and I said, Dominic, oops, whatever. I said, dude, I can go free anytime I want. I can walk out that door. And he said, he had a sour look on his face, and he said, well, if you can go free and you have that ability, you would leave us all behind. You don't want to help us. And what he was conveying was this, like, that it was unfair that I had the ability to do that. You see, his fiance was in the church, and he had been in the church since he was 22 years old. I think 22, 19. I don't know. He was in college when he got involved. He's a brilliant guy, and he could have done some really great things. As far as I know, he's still in. I still love him very much. But yeah, it took me a while to visualize. Yeah, right here. The person under mind control cannot visualize a positive, fulfilled future without being in the group. When I left, to a certain extent, I felt like I had lost everything I was. So I had to completely start over. No happiness or fulfillment outside the group. I couldn't disagree more. Once you leave, now I could see that while you're in there, but once you leave, you have all this freedom. I didn't know what to do with it. It's like I can do whatever I want, whatever I want. It's it's something that it's something that I took for granted. I didn't take it for granted, but it was just like, wow, I can do whatever. I can go play music if I want. I can go out to a bar and have a beer. I can smoke a joint if I want to smoke a joint. I can do whatever I want. No one's gonna be interrogating me about every little decision that I make. Terrible consequences will take place if you leave. That's the part that took me a long time because the OT3 materials. When I joined, the internet wasn't like it is now, and I know I may look young, but I'm 36. When I joined in 2002, the beginning of 2002, the internet wasn't what it is now. I don't know if I could have found the information on OT3 if I had tried. And if I did, well, no, I couldn't have because I was too involved with the church at the time. So, um, it wouldn't have been possible. Uh, so I had that fear and belief that it's possible that I could die from the OT3 materials if I read them. Shunning of leave takers, fearing fear of being rejected by friends, peers, and family. Well, that happened. I kind of was I was honorably discharged, so I wasn't declared or anything. So I could still talk to other Scientologists, but I was very careful to do so because of my views on certain things, policies and stuff. So uh, there were certain people who just wouldn't talk to me because they knew that I was on staff and that I left, and they thought that was irresponsible and unethical. Um, Never a legitimate reason to leave from the group's perspective. People who leave are weak, undisciplined, unspiritual, worldly, brainwashed by family, counselors, seduced by money, sex, and rock and roll. Yeah. Um, mm, I don't know, man. The emotional control, or the emotional aspect of it. Since I said it earlier, I go a lot on feeling, and you know, there were things that I felt from people, not Scientology, but from people. You'll hear this. A lot of the people in Scientology are very good people. They're awesome people, and that's what I felt, you know. And so that's kind of what kept me there. Um, but I also couldn't ignore the other feelings that I would get, like at these events, at the the Shrine Auditorium and stuff like that. I just like, this is feels wrong. This feels bullshit. It's all made up, and that stuff would get me into trouble. And sometimes I would share it with the parishioners. I would level with them. I needed them to buy something. I needed them to do a course or whatever, but I'd level with them and say, look, you don't need to be, you don't need to believe this bullshit. Just do the thing that's going to help you. Just do the thing that's going to help you because it helped me, and that's what I would tell them. Did it help me in the short term? Yes, it did. In the long term, it did way more damage than I would have ever imagined. But in the short term, it did help me. Um, and I've explained that in previous videos. But if this is your first video watching, I had a really bad drug experience. I was hallucinating for 6 months straight. I did the purification rundown, and it eased the hallucinations. I don't think the purification rundown is safe, and I do not condone it. But I took the risk, and I did it, and it did help. I was desperate, but the risks far outweighed the benefits. Um, I think that's all I got for today. I'm real interested to see this whole Scientology network being launched and what kind of stuff they're going to do and say. Um, so that's all I got for today. I'm going to go have a great non Scientology day. Peace and love. Later.